Hello and welcome to your Scotland Rugby News podcast. I think this is a podcast within the international window, but unfortunately, only myself and Gavin were available for selection, so you're stuck with us. I get to be your host. My name is Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg Shaped, and I'm joined by my partner in crime, Gavin Harper. Hello, sir. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Thanks. How are you?
Yeah, on my high horse, but we'll get to that.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. Quick word from our sponsor before we kick off. The Scotland Rugby News podcast is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV today. There are thousands of jobs across Scotland, and you can find the one for you at S1 Jobs. So go on, start your search. Interesting. We've moved from a Wednesday to a Thursday so we can discuss Scotland team selection. We've chewed this one over. I think a lot of people have. We know that this game is not one of the 3 weekends that has been assigned for an autumn test or a November test. So it's a Edinburgh Glasgow select. And you can never pick these, can you? You can never pick.
No, you can't. And I think you might be happier if it was called an Edinburgh Glasgow select. But I think that's maybe by the by somewhat. I think, there's not a lot that you can kind of read into this selection because, there's a huge game next weekend against New Zealand. But I think what it shows is Gregor wants to use the whole squad, and there was a lot of chat today. I'm not long home from the press conference. There was a lot of chat about managing players' minutes, and it's been a disrupted start to the season, and so I think he actually said nobody will play all four. It'd be unlikely somebody will start 3 games. So I think we can almost say.
This is the weird one because we have Tonga and America. And I've seen lots of chat, and I think I was when we were chatting on the phone this week, and I was talking about the Facebook page from New Zealand, the Myth of Damien McKenzie, that I really like and has some good stuff on it. And they had posted about Australia not having their overseas players released for their game against England, but England have had their Premiership players released, but they've had to pay for that privilege.
Yeah.
Now, the richest rugby union in the world can afford to pay for that privilege. The Australians have made a decision that they're not going to. And I see some Aussies throwing mud saying, you've just had a really lucrative Lions tour, why not? But I don't know what the figures are, and I don't know how these things work. And they've played these games before, but England seldom play. They certainly never play 2 smaller nations.
Mm-hmm.
And when you've got the All Blacks, 15 are playing it, and you've got the Barbarians and the Springbok, and it's just it's such a weird period in international rugby.
It's particularly a strange one. I think back in the day, if you go back maybe 10 years, I think there was the odd country played a 4th game. I think now that we're into this, basically everybody's playing at least 4 fixtures. Like, there maybe needed to be a bit of flexibility on the old international window. But look, it is what it is. I think Gregor again today was saying that, this is likely to be the last year of it because this Nations Cup is coming in next year, and that will be played over the summer window and the November. So we'll probably see a relaxing of. But I mean, yeah, I don't know why we've ended up caught up in this, and it means, look, at the end of the day, it means that players are missing out on the chance to represent their countries.
Are you hitting me with that one? Is that really, are you just trying to wind me up? Is that where that's coming in?
I know that you have many views on the old
Yeah, didn't even get me
international
started
window.
on that new competition. The last thing we need are more international matches and more flights. Anyway, the point of this obviously is it's the Glasgow and Edinburgh players, although I'm under the impression, and you've been in to see them, the players are released. They're all training together. The English-based players are all in camp, no?
Yes, but
Yes.
yeah. So the English-based players are all in camp.
And
The, Fre-
French-based players and
the French-based players are all in camp. The difference is this is a Prem Cup weekend down south, so I think we can say, like, for example, the Bath team's out and Finn's not required for Bath. Where it'll become different is the French guys will have to go back to their clubs because they've got around the top 14 fixtures. So I suppose from that point of view, it also makes it a juggling act for coaches because Gregor, for example, will not want Jamie Ritchie to be injured, worst case scenario. He probably doesn't want him playing 80 minutes a week before and then having to fly back from France to Edinburgh, and then does that delay the start of the weekend training and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of balancing to it, but I think
I get what you mean, but the only thing that's added to Jamie Ritchie's load is a flight. The boys who are playing against America are still, some of them are still playing 80 minutes. So, there's some who will go through recovery on Sunday, Monday, whereas others will be having a different type of session, and that's all part of the game. But to have, I think that's it. It's making sure that they all arrive back fit. The squad that's announced, I think Gregor had been quoted saying that some players they won't spend the whole time with the squad. Is that right? So the reason the squad was named as 45 players is because some will be used and then return to their clubs, or they get to go on holiday, and others might come in.
Yeah, so I think that seems to be the case. We've had a comment that I just want to quickly touch on. Any news on Emerging Scotland against Tonga?
Ross, you are a man in the know. Yes, I love it.
He is a man in the know. So, yeah.
There's not many folk know about that, Ross, so you can take the hit for this.
So Emerging Scotland will play Tonga, a venue to be confirmed on the Monday before Scotland play Tonga in the international on the Saturday, which I think is the 17th of November. I should know, that's my birthday. But anyway, yeah.
Drop that in, why don't you?
That game, but the sort of headline, if you like, from that is the game will be played behind closed doors. So there'll be no fans.
I love that expression.
There is a bit of discussion as to whether the media will get in and be able to cover the game.
They're not letting you in.
Personally, me or the press. I mean, I'm probably
just
banned.
You. Yeah.
So I think that I'm not sure if that possibly changes what happens with the squad, because Gregor had previously said, players would probably go back to clubs, but actually, some of them might get a game in the emerging game, but I also would like to see that used as a proper development game for guys like Ewan Ferry and Jarry, who's obviously missed out. Maybe Gregor Hiddleston gets a go. But yeah, that game is happening.
And those are games. I like that. I like that idea. I don't know if I particularly like the phrase "emerging Scotland," because in some respects you could say that's a bit of some of these players are not emerging, but those are games that could be played against Chile and various others like we had last year, where it's an A team, or olden days we had A teams and B teams. So selection, Duhan and Darcy both start, which I didn't see coming, I have to admit. Duhan, 50th cap could have been against the All Blacks at Murrayfield, but it's not going to be. It's going to be against America, but you don't get to pick those. And he must be hoping he's going to get his paws on the ball and add to that try tally, because he's got Darcy playing as well, who's at his heels. Darcy, potentially, and I don't want to jinx him, but hopefully he's going to get his 50th cap in this autumn series as well, because I think he's on 47, is that right?
He is. So fingers crossed we'll get a Darcy Graham 50th. And obviously Duhan gets his 50th at the weekend. Look, I think to your point, I think you're right. I'm not sure many of us would have picked them both in the team. I think, there's a piece just gone live on the site now that Gregor was basically saying that the non-selection of Sione is to do with nothing other than he's rested for next week.
He's gonna have to be flying next week.
Sione. Oh yeah, I mean he's going to have to be at absolutely 100%. And to be fair, the whole team are. So Stafford gets a go. Stafford's captain again.
We did call that. I think I called that.
Yeah,
I think that's about the only thing I've picked right out of that team, because there's very few others I think I would have named. I was chatting to Liam McConnell's dad's best mate the other day, and they were sort of weren't sure, is he in, is he out, is he going to start on the bench, how's it going to go? I don't think Liam saw it coming that he was going to start.
Yeah, I mean, when we spoke to him at the start of the week, he was like I'm just loving being here, and I asked him, have you given yourself a chance to think about what it would mean to win a cap? And he sort of said, well, kinda, but not really, because I don't want to get ahead of myself, which is entirely fair. But
it's not just winning a cap. He's getting to start. Like that's not really how you picture that. I don't think he's probably thinking I get to stand for the anthem and sit on the bench and see how it goes, and then come on and make an impact for 20 minutes. But actually, what he's being told is, right, go for it. And interesting that Dylan Richardson's been picked at 7. And then you've got Dempsey, who needs to play some rugby and smash into things. So that back row, I might say this, and somebody will remember it. I reckon that back row might never play together again.
I mean, I think there's a good chance of that. Look, I think the Dylan Richardson one's interesting because Gregor had basically said last week and then again today, he's not played at hooker for Edinburgh. They've not kind of viewed him as a hooker yet. Obviously, Darge is injured. Onyama Christie's not available. Jamie Ritchie's not available. Neither's Josh Bayliss. So, actually, if you're chucking Liam McConnell in, well, him and Dylan Richardson have gone okay for Edinburgh in the last few weeks. So, maybe chucking them in as a combination. I think the bit that probably surprised me, in tandem with the conversation about can't play or maybe can't start 3 or 4 games, was that Dempsey starts this one. You would assume Dempsey will start next weekend. But then Magnus is on the bench. There was an option there of saying, well, actually, to give Liam the sort of utmost protection or help, if you like, we'll just start the whole Edinburgh back row. But clearly Gregor thinks Jack Dempsey needs good minutes, and he's probably right. And look, he said the same thing. Scott Cummings was the one in the forwards that sort of caught my eye, because I thought, well, hang on a minute, you would expect him to be involved probably as a starter next week. But Gregor had said, well, he came back from after being away with the Lions, he came back late, so he actually could do with a game, which I think is probably fair. And then
he's also not going to play 80 because of what's on the bench. He's not going to play 80.
No, exactly. So if he plays 50 minutes, you would then expect he'll be absolutely fine to go next week.
Let's stay in the pack. So my comment about the back row, I think probably sticks with the whole pack. That pack's never playing together again. And it is quite a mixed bag, because you've got Suz Glasgow, obviously. Paddy's not played a huge amount, although he is packing down next to his clubmate Darcy, obviously, because it's an Edinburgh-Glasgow select.
Yep.
You've then got a second row partnership, one Glasgow, one Edinburgh, and Marshall will be desperate to have a crack because he has been in, and then he was he wasn't close, and now he's back in again. So Marshall will be desperate to have a go, but he's not played 80 minutes consistently for Edinburgh.
No, you're right.
So he's in, and then you've got Liam, who is 5 games wet in professional rugby, really. Dylan Richardson, who was that versatile South African who can do more than one thing. And I've spoken to a couple of people recently who he was a back row, but they made him a hooker because he's not a gigantor in South Africa. So move forward because you're good enough, but go and hook. And then you've got Dempsey, who a lot of folk at one point were saying could be a lion, and then through no fault of his, injury, and he didn't get to go, or wasn't able to give himself that chance. So it's a really interesting forward pack that pretty much all other than Scott Cummings, I think, have a point to prove.
Yeah, and I think, look, Gregor was asked earlier about, is this is the game next week a realistic target for a Liam McConnell or a Harry Morris on the bench? And without saying as much, I think his response was maybe they should just look at this week first. And I think he's right, and I think that applies to so many of that pack. Darcy Ray first start 6 years on from his first cap.
I'm really chuffed for him. The way because when WP left, everybody thought the end is nigh, and Paul Hill came up as the answer, and then unfortunately suffered injury. And Darcy Ray, it just looks like he enjoys his rugby. I don't know if he's at that point in his career where it's like, right, I've been banging down the door, I've been trying to do that, and he's probably playing as well as he's ever played.
Yeah,
and now he's got this chance. So I'm really chuffed for Darcy. As well, I am for all of them, but I don't know Darcy. Suz I've known for a long time, Paddy I've known, so I'm delighted for them. But the way Darcy Ray's career has unfolded, this seems like a great opportunity for him.
And I think he's been quite open before with us that in his first season at Edinburgh, he was still going out and sort of palling about with all the Glasgow boys, and he was commuting, and he struggled to almost make Edinburgh home. And then I think last summer thought, actually, do you know what? If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it properly. And ended up moving to Edinburgh and has basically thrown his lot in. And I actually think he's got the rewards because he's playing better, he's playing more regularly. I think obviously Javen Sebastian moving on in the summer has helped in that respect. But I think, look, if it came to it, I'd feel a lot more confident now about Darcy Ray having to potentially start next week than I would have done even 6 months ago.
Well, let's hang on. Let me pause that there then. So what's the story with Xander? Because somebody must have asked Gregor today.
Yes, we did. So Gregor seems quite upbeat about Xander. He seems to, Xander's been training with a team and will continue to do so as they sort of prepare to play America. I get the impression Xander will be available next week. The flip side of that is I get the impression Rory Darge won't be. I think Gregor said he was still basically doing a managed sort of training. It didn't sound like he'd been taking part in full training. So look, I think probably the New Zealand game is going to come a week early or maybe a couple of weeks early for Darge. But as Gregor said, when he sort of caveated his answer, Darge has been out for a lot less time. So it'll be easier for Darge to come straight back into the team than it would be for Xander. Again, though, the balance is there are more options in the back row, or Xander is our saviour at tight head.
I think if Xander plays, like I know you said about Darcy starting, but there was always that feeling Xander has to go 80 or 78. The way Darcy Ray's going, and I hope, and this American team, just as an aside here, I went through the American squad, and I don't just mean I mean the whole squad that has travelled, and there's one name that I know, and because fly half for McGinty, he's the only one, but he's unavailable. He's not with the squad. So in a whole American squad, I know none of them. A few of them are unattached. They don't have clubs. Most of them are playing at American clubs, and I don't know any of them, which I find I'm a little bit embarrassed by. I have to admit. So you think this Scotland team has to be thinking this is entirely about us. Like, it's difficult to prep anyway. Like, America can't really prep because that forward pack never played together before, and it's a new defence coach, and it's very difficult to prep for the first game of the competition. But this Saturday has to be all about Scotland. It has to be Radford getting his defensive structure across, and that desire and killer instinct, I think, was his snippet, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And some of these players just going, right, I don't actually know what this guy does in the line out. I don't actually know where he likes to step, or this has to just be about us. And I think that could be quite exciting. And the players could be relishing that to just go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right. And I think Gregor sort of alluded to the fact that, because this is
I'm
America.
giving the analysts some time off, like none today.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, hopefully they're at home with their feet up. Like, look, I think you're right. There's not going to be that detail of analysis on America. That's probably a daft answer, but it's a given that you wouldn't analyse America the same way. I think the other point to make about the American squad, because you're right, there's not a lot of names that you flick through and say, oh yeah, remember him. But there's quite a few of their players who play in France. So one guy, particularly Jack Iscaro, who was actually at Glasgow on a training contract when he was at Old Glory. He's now playing for Stade. He was a hooker then. He's moved to loosehead prop. He's now playing at Stade Francais. But again, because of the window, he's not available. And like there's another, we should address the elephant in the room that is that Rufus McLean obviously played for Scotland, is now qualified for America, won his first caps in the summer. Having been sacked by the SRU, he has been pulled from this game. And I think basically the line from American rugby was, because of the circumstances of the case and the attention that it'll bring, they've decided to stand him down. But yeah, apart from that, you think back in the day, there was America probably travelled with a squad of players who were in Premiership clubs, and they were definitely more, better known than this squad is. So look, I think from a Scotland point of view, you would hope it's a win, it's a comfortable win, and it's there's no hiccups, there's no injuries. This one's an interesting one. Rumour has it Donald Trump will be in the crowd.
Aye, but you know who that's coming through, and that's typical that he can't spell. Look at his typing, and then Guy Frater is the world's best engraver. He is the trophy guy for Gala Shields. He has engraved some of the most prestigious trophies in the British Isles, and he can't spell for the life of him. And I don't think he's ever made a mistake. Well, he certainly wouldn't admit to ever making a mistake. Donald Trump will not be there, Gusto. I have had that on authority.
That's your direct line to the White House, is it?
Well, I was actually speaking to somebody who is having to deal with Donald Trump at the moment, a diplomat who's well known in Scottish rugby. There he goes. That's better. He can work emojis.
Yeah,
well done, Gusto. In fact, Gus, they look like you.
This one from Grant, I think, is interesting. This is as big as any after the defeat to Fiji. Scotland can't afford to lose any of our games. We actually asked Gregor this afternoon, is the target 4 out of 4 from these games? Does that now have to be? And of course, Gregor does as Gregor does. There was an immaculate sidestepping of answering the question when he replied, "Our focus has got to be winning every game we go into."
Yeah,
So,
and that's so Grant. Right, here's you've given me an opportunity, Grant. So thank you. This window nonsense has impacts on this stuff. So Australia are not able to select their strongest squad against England. The momentum of that. So yes, Australia will then gain players next week, but potentially some of their better home-based players are being put under pressure against, and it's not the strongest England team, I don't think. It's not Borthwick's first choice, but it's still very strong. You pick up 2 or 3 injuries, all of a sudden you're weakened going into the next one, and I find it so frustrating.
but that's what I mean. Like, if you look at that from an Australian point of view, like you're telling guys like Will Skelton, sorry, you can't play for your country because of some bureaucracy. You're telling Rory Hutchinson, by the way, Hugh Jones is injured, but you also can't play because there's this red tape that somebody's decided the weekend this game's on isn't within the parameters of an international season. Like, and yeah, it just, and then these guys come back, but they've missed a week. But the guys who get the opportunity this week are maybe a week further on, and so you're right. It has huge ramifications for the whole thing. And I think, look, if the Nations Cup brings one thing, let's hope it's the end of us talking about. I feel like this should be a glazing podcast. We spend more time talking about windows than rugby.
And I'm not a fan of the Nations Cup, but we'll get to that another day. The other bit is personal pocket. Liam McConnell, he'll be buying a new car after this, after his game on Saturday, because he'll be getting a healthy wee "well done, son, there's your first cap" bonus. Right, I'm bored of talking about the forwards. Backline. Let's cut straight to the point. Jamie Dobie gets to start and he's vice captain. That has to be a statement of intent from Mr. Townsend. Has to be.
It has to be, but it's also reward for the fact that Jamie Dobie's now been in this squad for a good 4 years.
He's only got, I think I was looking at, he's only got 14 caps.
I know.
But when you think who they're against, that's a North American and South American tour, and it's a, so we've still not really seen him properly tested.
But I feel like this season
has to be.
It has to be.
And he was magic last week. He was outstanding last week.
And I feel like it's taken him a bit of time, but
this is, so I was chatting to his mentor, Roddy Deans, about this, and this is back to this situation we've got. Edinburgh, I've got 4 hookers in the squad. In Glasgow, I've got none. There's no Edinburgh scrum halves in the squad, but you've got George Horn and Jamie Dobie. So Jamie Dobie would benefit hugely from having a consistent run at scrum half for Glasgow. And we saw what he was capable of against Ospreys. So if he gets a consistent run for Glasgow, surely that gives him the chance. Now, that's coming from one of George Horn's biggest fans. But I feel like Jamie Dobie is not, maybe he's not the future anymore. Jamie Dobie could be the now, and let's go for it.
Do you remember? I mean, I think maybe last year you and I were talking about this as if Ben White is fit, Ben White probably is the starter, yeah. and then George Horns was at the time was the guy coming off the bench because he's done a bit on the wing and he's good at 9 and he gives you that tempo. But I think, and I really like, and I feel like I'm criticising George Horn here because I'm not.
If you start talking about his box kick, I am hanging up.
And I really like George Horn as a rugby player. But it's not really happened with Scotland. He's now 30. Though if you look at the number of games he's started that have gone against top tier nations, they're not that many. And the one in Italy in the 24 Six Nations didn't go that well. I feel like Jamie Dobie might just have nudged ahead of him. And if you think back to like the World Cup, when Ali Price was in the third scrum half in the squad, it was basically, will Ben White or Ali Price start with George Horne on the bench? And I feel like that's maybe where we're getting to with Dobie, but Dobie can also play on the wing, which means that, for example, if Gregor thinks I'm going to go 6-2 against the All Blacks, well, you've got Tom Jordan and Jamie Dobie, who basically gives you cover of the whole back division. And I was thinking about this when I was driving home, the Wales team that won all those Grand Slams and stuff, under Warren Gatland, most people would have confidently predicted Mike Phillips at 9, George North on the wing, Jamie Robertson, Jonathan Davis in the centre, Lee Halfpenny at fullback,
Stephen Jones at 10.
Stephen Jones or Dan Biggar at 10, and there was probably a space up for grabs on the wing. I think that's where we're at now with Scotland. There's Ben White, Finn Russell, Sione and Hugh when Hugh's fit. There's maybe a doubt over one of the wingers, and I think that's possibly a bit of the selection this weekend. Kinghorn at fullback. Just feel like we're maybe past talking about, well, what's our best team? I think now the thing is, let's see who is in the rest of the squad and how that sort of shakes up looking at the World Cup.
See, I did this and I was going to post it and I didn't know what upset folk. And I sort of started to pick what I thought would be an alternative to Gregor's 15, leaving out as many of the big names as I could. And I had Kyle Rowe at 15, Stain and Aaron Reid on the wings, Hutchison and Redpath in the centres, Tom Jordan at 10 with Dobie at 9. And then Suz, George Turner, Darcy Ray as the front row, Samuel and Henderson, who's not in the squad, and then a back row of Brown, Bayliss and Bradbury. And that doesn't include Blair Kinghorn, Darcy Graham, Duhan, Sione, Finn Russell, Ben White, Darge, Fagers, any of the Fagersons. There's depth. There feels like there's depth there. Where I don't know. Is it the gel? Is it the not being able to? So we pick this team against America, knowing that, like, realistically of that team next week, Darcy, Duhan, Dobie, Scott Cummings, Dempsey. So 5 of the starting 15 could and would start. Like you wouldn't have too many folk getting upset if Darcy starts on the right wing, Duhan starts it on the left wing, Dobie potentially could start depending on where Gregor's going, Scotty Cummings, Jack Dempsey. If they started, nobody's raising an eyebrow, really.
No, totally. No, Ross certainly isn't, and he's right. That's like,
thank you, Ross.
Team. And if you were, if you go back, if you were picking that team a few years ago, there definitely wouldn't be the same level of depth, the experience.
Oh no, not even close. We weren't bringing folk off the bench not that long ago.
Exactly. So you look at that,
and I didn't pick Fergus Burke in that alternative squad either. I had Tom Jordan at 10 because Tom Jordan, I feel, suffers in the way you've spoken about George Horne has suffered, almost being labelled as here's what you do, and it's not stick on you're our 12 or you're our 15 or George Horne has been given that label of, he changes the tempo, he brings it on, he doesn't control, great rugby player. George Horne's had to live with all these labels for such a long time, and I'm not sure that all of them are particularly true. Dobie feels like the label he's had is he's young and he's not had the experience, but how do you can only get older and give me the experience, and I think he's getting there. And then you look at Adam Hastings, and I mean, his old man, well, his family will be delighted, but so will he, because Gloucester just never really fired for him, and I was gutted because I really liked that idea of him going and having a crack, and I thought the Premiership might have suited him.
It also felt like a good fit, like Gloucester as a club and the way they play, the sort of DNA. I thought when that came out that Adam was going there, perfect. That's a great move.
I thought it was a great move for Scotland too, because it freed up another slot up here, and it meant he got to go and test himself at that level.
And I think at the time, Ross Thompson was sort of coming through, and you think, well, actually, that's the natural progression, is that somebody senior moves on. For the injury reasons, Gloucester never worked, but I actually think Adam looked back to close to his best again with Glasgow. My concern is he again knows he's going to be second choice at best, but again, he's probably not the guy on the bench because Tom Jordan's there, and so. But I think what that does is it means that I talked about Stafford earlier. Adam Hastings knows he's not going to play next week unless there's some catastrophe. And it means that these guys kind of disregard the fact they're playing USA and say, well, actually, it's a chance to play for Scotland and it's a chance for me to express myself. And I think...
I'm gutted, though, for Adam, because Ross Thompson's on the bench. Ross Thompson's not coming on anywhere else other than 10.
No, but I did think if you were making a change, and I mean, it involves a lot of moving parts, but Adam could stay on. Adam could probably play, and I wouldn't be surprised if Adam plays 80 minutes and moves to fullback. Kyle Rowe slides to the wing and you take one of the wingers off. That wouldn't stun me.
Do you know, I think it would be George Hornon and Dobie onto the ding-a-ling for one of them to come off.
Also potential. I think, again, there might be a bit of a split there. Look, I think this selection might mean Kyle Steyn is a stick-on to play next week. Otherwise, why is he not in the 23?
Yeah, I have to admit, when I first looked at the team, when I saw Kyle, I thought it was Kyle Steyn. It wasn't until my second read I was like, oh no, Kyle Steyn's not in that squad.
Yeah, exactly. So, is it a bit of a shootout between the two Edinburgh wingers for one of the spots next week? I think if it is, Duhan needs a bigger game than Darcy does. I think Darcy's maybe got a wee bit more, although we spoke to Gregor earlier about Duhan, and I mean, he was waxing lyrical about Duhan's performances and his defence, all the rest of it.
So they're both British Lions on the wings against America, and it's funny when you say that, because here's all the stuff you just know you're hearing. Duhan is going to get to play 80 minutes because he's his 50th cap and he'll score 5 tries, and that'll be a nice thing, because actually, Duhan, you're not getting to play next week. Or Darcy, you're not getting to play next week because we're back to that thing you're going to have to live with forever. You're very small, and we're playing against the All Blacks. The All Blacks didn't really want to play against either of those wingers. I don't care what MD says, and folk can line up the things, the weaknesses in the game of Darcy and Duhan as much as they like. But as an opposition, you don't want to be playing against Darcy Graham and Duhan van der Merwe. You don't, because of the things they can do. And this, I'm not going to use work rate. What am I looking for? Their involvements are probably not as high as some other wingers, but when they're involved, it can be a 5-point dot down, and they've punished you. So I'm really interested to see, because it's a big statement next week for Gregor. I think. I think when Gregor picks this All Blacks, the team to play against the All Blacks, it's a big statement of, I'm in, I'm not. We're building towards World Cup. It's still going to be Gregor Townsend's the head coach. So I think there's going to be a lot to read into the selection next week.
And as we say, the chances are high that the player who misses out on the starting jersey might not be involved at all. So there might be a bit of that comes into the consideration. I think you're right. It's a bit like, in football, when a manager drops a goalkeeper, once you've committed to the making the change, I feel like if Gregor makes a change and it becomes Kyle Steyn and Darcy or Kyle Steyn and Duhan, he needs to commit to it. It being a one-game thing feels a bit pointless. So I think you're right. There is a lot on it. I think it's be really interesting to see then what happens going into Argentina. Like, obviously, we can talk about that game close at the time, but I'd be interested. I'd also be interested and like folk watching who people think should start, because like it's been Darcy and Duhan for so long. Glasgow fans all clamour for Kyle Steyn. Aaron Reid's playing well at Sale. Kyle Rose. We chatted about Kyle Rose not long ago, and like there's now an abundance of options. So yeah, folk can comment in and let us know what their team would be for the All Blacks.
Yeah, Kyle Rose, another one. Gregor feels like he's a 6'2" bench kind of guy now, because he has the players like Jordan, Dobie, Horn. Some of the centres can play. Blair Kinghorn gives you a bit of flexibility. I think there's enough that he's likely going to go 6-2 against the All Blacks. Yeah, Umar, I think it's who do you put on the left wing? Now, I know I'm now pinching hairs here, but both of them are 14s.
Kyle Steyn plays a fair bit on the left wing for Glasgow.
And he would be. It would be Kyle Steyn that moved to the left wing. And because Blair's your stick on at 15, isn't he? I mean, he's there. Sione's 12. A name we've not mentioned. So everybody else's name has been mentioned. Who we've not mentioned is Ollie Smith. And he's an, I hate this phrase, but he's an under the radar kind of guy. Like his selection is probably the one that will be least spoken about of that 15. That's not of that 15. Yeah, there's players on the bench maybe not getting as excited about, but Ollie Smith has just quietly gone about being a very good player. But because he doesn't, he's not Hugh Jones. He's not doing it in the Premiership. He's in a team where there's a fair amount of rotation. Stafford can play at 13. I'm interested to see how he goes.
And first test start at 13.
So and he's getting to play with Hastings, Stafford, and Kyle Rowe. So there's enough familiarity around him at 13.
And that has to be part of it. Like, look, we know that Matt Curry's got his troubles, and I really, really hope we see Matt Curry back on the pitch soon, because that feels like that probably would have been his opportunity. I think he's played well every time he's played for Scotland. But I think when you consider the injury problems that Ollie Smith had, just after not long after the World Cup, and he spent basically a year out. He played for Emerging Scotland this time last year, was basically the first sort of steps on his road back. And he's had to be patient, because there's obviously loads of competition at Glasgow, and he probably, he's another guy that's maybe further down the pecking order. But again, when you start looking at World Cup squads, and he's a guy who's played on the wing, he was in the last World Cup and played at 15.
He's only 25. Like and that that squad, talking about World Cup, and World Cups tend to be a bit of a full stop new chapter, and things move on and people move on and folk disappear to Japan to play rugby there, or Rugby 360 takes off and Scotland didn't let folk play anymore. Ollie Smith's still got this plus another World Cup cycle to go. Yeah,
and I think that's the thing. Like, I think he could be a long-term option at 13. He could be a longer-term option at 15. I think what I'm interested in is that combination between him and Stafford, him and Kyle Rowe. But again, I think it's a chance for somebody who, let's face it, probably won't play next week, to go and say, do you know what? This is what I'm about in an international. I think he's playing well for Glasgow, and why not? Let's have a look at him.
It's funny when you get selections like that. Like, it's his first start at 13. And international rugby, you kind of feel like, surely you're picking somebody that's where they play. That's their position. Stafford at 12, I mean, brilliant player, great leader, great captain, brilliant human. You just kind of feel like he's come around at such a crap time.
Yeah, and I actually asked Gregor about this today. I mean, like, for a guy who's not in your first choice 15 to basically be parachuted into the team time after time, and almost every time it's like, oh yeah, Stafford will captain the midweek team, and I think, like, to be asked to be captain of your country must be, there's only a few people can tell us what that's like, but like, to be constantly given the sort of carrot and stick of Stafford, you're going to play against America. All right, okay. Does that maybe mean I'm 50-50 for playing against, in the big game, but you're going to be captain? Like, it's a really sort of fine balancing act, I think, that for Gregor, but I also think it says a lot about the character that Stafford McDowell, the person, is, that he can say, you know what,
completely.
like, absolutely no bother, and I'll make sure that whether it's the All Blacks, whether it's a World Cup final, or whether it's America in a game outside the window, the level will be all the same, And I think Stafford.
I really hope Stafford gets to play the World Cup final. I really hope he does.
Listen, me and you both, but like, Stafford better than I do, but from the dealings that I've had with him, which have all been, as doing interviews, I've always got the impression that Stafford's a pretty level-headed and doesn't look too far ahead, and works hard, and I think those are all the things you want, A, in a captain, but B, also in a guy in your squad who, and Gregor actually called him a glue player, and he does feel a bit like that.
Class, a great human. The bench, Harry Morris, his mum and dad will be going up. I mean, his mum is mad as a box of frogs anyway, so they will be beside themselves if Harry gets on the turf, which he should do, to come on for Paddy. Nathan Macbeth, Murphy Walker, opportunity for them. Alex Samuel, he's not really at Glasgow. I was kind of hoping he was going to come up and go boom. He's not quite done that yet, but what an opportunity for him. I think it's, and I hope it's the kind of thing that really energizes him, and we see the rest of the season. We see Alex Samuel go and dominate and be really, really powerful alongside, and then you got Max Williamson, and I'm like so happy that Maggie's back in. That his performances have deserved it. He was becoming impossible to ignore, and when he comes on, which will likely be for Dempsey,
yeah,
I really hope that goes well. I doubt he'll feature against the All Blacks, but you never know how the next little bit pans out, because he might then get the shot against Argentina, because you still got Fagerson to come in. Dempsey's obviously there. Jamie Ritchie comes back. Darge potential. So the like you were talking about before, the depth in the back row. Hamish Watson's not getting a game at Edinburgh. You still got Luke Crosby. Freddie Douglas is still kicking around. Tom Curry got player of the match, I think, in the A game last week. And I've not even gone along the road to Glasgow yet. So the depth in the back row is, you wonder if some of them should be getting a shoulder tap and said, maybe you could go and be in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gregor Brown's a prime example of that. I think probably for the foreseeable, we should consider Gregor Brown as a second row now, because the competition is so great in the back row. Look, I think, to touch on some of the bench, the Harry Morris one will raise eyebrows because he's not Gregor Hiddleston and he's certainly not Johnny Matthews. And Glasgow fans have made their feelings perfectly clear that Johnny Matthews, they feel, should be in this squad. I don't know if people that are watching have great views on Johnny or on Gregor Hiddleston, but having watched Edinburgh's pre-season games, every single time, I think it was the Doncaster game, every single time I looked up, there was this guy flying out the defensive line and he was melting folk. And like, I know rugby pre-season and football are different in that there's not that sort of testimonial style, but he was absolutely tackling the house down. So the fact he's not had a go yet is maybe a wee bit of a surprise. But I think when we spoke to Gregor, he was chatting about Liam McConnell's pick is partly on what he's done for Edinburgh, but also partly on the potential that they see. And I think I was listening to Eddie Jones last week, who said something about you've always got to look one World Cup cycle ahead. So now coaches should be starting to think about 2031. And maybe this is the first sign of Gregor doing that by getting Liam McConnell in now and getting Harry Morris a chance off the bench. We see what they can do in an international without huge pressure. But like, what an occasion for him. The 2 second rows, I think, again, interesting because this time last year, it was all Max Williamson. He was going to be the guy. It felt like he was the sort of heir apparent maybe to Gilco. Gregor Brown's obviously maybe leapfrogged him a wee bit. I hope they both get on in good minutes. And as you say, they're absolutely flying around for the rest of the season. There's a clip, the game that Glasgow were badly beaten in Dublin, of Alex Samuel absolutely smashing Caelan Doris. So like he can throw it about physically. I think those guys have maybe got a wee bit to go before they're kind of proven internationals, but I'm interested to see how they go. The one for me that second row is another position. There's so much depth. The Cam Henderson one I don't get, and I get the feeling Gregor maybe doesn't think as highly as certainly I do. But like, I watch Cam Henderson play every week for Leicester and think, like, this guy's too good a rugby player to be left out the Scotland squad, never mind the team. Ewan Johnson's playing in the top 14, so I suppose there again is an example of the depth. But for me,
Jamie Hodgson at Newcastle.
But for me, like, get Cam Henderson in the squad and let's see what he can do. George here thinks Harry Morris should be proving himself in an Edinburgh shirt.
George, I get it, right? And Johnny Matthews is a mate of mine. I'm gutted he's not in, and some of the comments on certain pages in the last week about Johnny Matthews, I left one. I had to leave a group because I couldn't bear some of the nonsense. I totally get what you mean, George, and that I think if you were listening earlier, I made my comment about there being 4 Edinburgh hookers in, no Edinburgh scrum halves in. It's all, Ben White or Glasgow scrum halves. Harry Morris is hungry. He is desperate. He's a pain in the tonsils. Him and Paddy Harrison, if you speak to Edinburgh players, like, the intensity these two boys bring at training is so high. But no wonder, because they didn't get to play. So where do you put all that energy and enthusiasm? You put it into training. And I don't disagree with you. But if he's not going to get the shot, then this is a great opportunity for him, and he will get on. I don't know how long. Some of this is pre-planned. Paddy Harrison will be desperate to play, and he's a pain in the tonsils. He will be smacking folk, and he'll want to carry, and he'll be busy around the breakdown. But Harry Morris will be, and the thing that folk keep chucking at Johnny Matthews is that he can't throw. You didn't score that many tries at the back of a mall if you can't throw the ball in first. I think Ewan Ashman's a British Lion, and fans keep having a crack at him about his throwing. So,
sorry to interrupt, but the one on Johnny that I'm interested in is from what I understand, there was some concern over his defensive work, and that obviously was led by, as far as I know, Steve Tandy. I was interested in whether or not Scotland wanted a look at Johnny at all this November with a new defence coach, because maybe Lee Radford thinks, well, actually, hang on a minute, this guy's... But it feels like even with Tandy gone, the door is sort of shut on Johnny. And I think, and I've said this to you before, but there's almost comes a point when you say, look, I think we've all accepted that Martin Johnson and Johnny Wilkinson won't play for England again. You know, we probably know that when the All Blacks team's named to play Ireland, it's unlikely that Colin Meads and Tana Umaga will be in it. Unfortunately, and I know Johnny hasn't had that career, like...
You've just put Johnny Matthews in with Martin Johnson, Johnny Wilkinson, who have both won World Cups, Tana Umaga and Colin Meads. That's... I tell you what, Johnny, I think I could give you bigger compliments than Gav has, but there you go.
I mean, he would be in my squad, and I think he would be in most people's squad from the you know, if you use social media as a barometer. But
Didn't
I just
do that for anything.
No. But there comes a point when I think we have to say, okay, look, we understand that that's the direction of travel, but I'm still surprised that Gregor Hiddleston isn't in the mix, because I think he has proved himself with Glasgow, and to George's point, maybe Harry Morris hasn't with Edinburgh.
No, he hasn't. I don't, and I don't think Emery can. But how do we know when we've only got two teams, and in a position like hooker? I mean, two of them do get to play every week, but you know, you've got to win games, so you pick your front line. Ewan Ashman's a British Lion, so you pick Ewan Ashman. So then you've only got one choice, and Dylan Richardson's not getting to play hooker. And I don't know if it's now been decided, right, Dylan, you're not a hooker anymore. You are a back row, which has meant Hamish Watson's not been able to play in a rugby. So, but that then means Freddie Douglas doesn't get to play in a rugby either. And this is my biggest frustration, because when we talk about depth, and we do feel like we've got depth, some of it is local bias that I talk about often on here. But when we look at the Glasgow and Edinburgh squads, you know, folk on social media, oh, Edinburgh have still got such a good squad and we're underperforming. But you can only like maybe we're not. This Scotland squad, oh, it's the golden generation. You're only golden if you win something. So how do we know how good these players are? It's so difficult, because only 15 folk can get the go. And that, like your point about Cam Henderson, like Murray McCallum's international career didn't last very long, and I don't know why that was. And very few props are able to play. Not that you need them to play both sides of the scrum anymore, but there's so many stories. Like the whole thing's littered all the way down. And this team, as I said, I think there's 5 in that starting 15 who we wouldn't be surprised if we start against the All Blacks. And who knows? I mean, talking about social media being a barometer, by the end of this autumn, social media could be a place to avoid, depending on how things go.
Yes, I mean, yeah, you're 100% right. Look, I was speaking to somebody earlier who said, if Scotland lose at the weekend, send the taxi for Gregor. And I'm saying, well, he's just signed a new contract, so that's probably not going to happen, even if Scotland lose. But look, I think, just on the points you made there, the Harry Morris one, and to a lesser degree Liam McConnell, feel a wee bit like the Freddie Douglas selection of 12 months ago.
Well, Harry Morris is Welsh. His old man's Welsh, so they could well have been chapping on the door.
Well, you never know. You know, if Steve Tandy maybe had one eye on how things were going there. The thing I would say about it is it feels a wee bit, and obviously nobody would commit to this publicly, but it feels a wee bit like a shot across the bows at Sean Everett to say, get these guys a game. Because they're not playing for Edinburgh, and all of a sudden they're parachuted into the international setup, and I don't know, I just wonder, is there a bit of a, well, if you're not going to play them, we'll have a look at them. The other one I think that is interesting is what happens now with these guys, because Freddie Douglas won a cap 12 months ago, but, you know, went with the 20s on in the summer as opposed to going on tour. You know, opportunities for tours and all that kind of stuff are going to be few and far between for the World Cup. So does Liam McConnell get a go this weekend and then maybe not get another go until after the World Cup? Or is this a realistic chance for these guys to say, actually, I'm in the mix and I'm the here and now?
Well, on the Liam McConnell one, it appears he is the first choice 6 at Edinburgh.
Yeah.
So by World Cup time, Liam McConnell could be 15, 18 games deep in a professional career.
But does that change?
If Freddie Douglas, by this time a World Cup comes around, might not have much more to add to his stats.
Yeah.
Because Dylan Richardson's now a 7 and Hamish Watson's still there and Connor Boyle's still there and Luke Crosby's still there.
The Dylan Richardson one was one I was going to... You mentioned that. You mentioned that a couple of times. The sort of line that we are being given is that Dylan Richardson will move back to hooker. But
so there's even less chance of Harry Morris getting to play.
Exactly. So that's my point. If you know a guy like Gregor Hiddleston's going to play every week, either off the bench or starting with Johnny, then, but you're almost overlooking him in favour of a guy who's not, and I'm not saying he's got no prospect of playing, but his prospects of playing at club level are severely diminished by the fact he's got 3 Scotland internationals above him. So we've got a logjam of Edinburgh hookers, so to speak, and it just doesn't all. We've only got 2 teams; it doesn't all add up. The other one, Murray McCallum. How good would it be to have Murray McCallum in this squad and have Murray McCallum and Xander together, say on the bench, and if something went drastically wrong or Xander, there was a doubt over his, you've got a guy there on the other who's covering the other side, but can cover both sides. I just wonder if that would come in. That's something that you feel like Erasmus would think about.
Yeah, but I think Murray and Johnny Matthews are in the same group with Colin Meads, Tano Umanga, Johnny Wilkinson, and Martin Johnson.
Yeah, I agree.
Unfortunately, I think that ship has sailed. And
however, a few weeks ago, I think I was saying to you, I thought Magnus Bradbury was possibly in the same group. So
yeah, but I don't disagree with that, and it certainly felt like that. But the way Magnus's performances have spoken, I don't think that could be ignored.
No, I agree.
And he's been made club captain.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. You talked about Liam McConnell as the first choice Edinburgh 6. Like, we've not even mentioned somebody like Ewan Ferry, who's been playing really well at Glasgow. Ben Muncaster.
But that's what I mean. I went through Edinburgh and I said I've not even made it to Scotstoun yet. And that's us talking about depth. And Ben Muncaster, you just what does the kid have to do to stay healthy?
Yeah, I mean, he's another one that has the same luck as Harry Patterson. So yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. We maybe see these guys in that emerging Scotland game that we mentioned right at the start against Tonga. That feels like it would be one that if you get them, they could be a couple of more.
And this is where the olden days when I was a lad of you went and watched the under 21s play as the curtain raiser to the A team on the Friday at Inverleith or wherever it was before the Scotland game. I don't know why, because I don't know how much money it would cost, and even if it became the Scotland A team was only SRU employee or Scottish Rugby employees of an Edinburgh Glasgow Select that played on the Thursday night before an international in following the Six Nations, what an amazing opportunity that would be to go and play, at Richmond on the Thursday night before Scotland played England at Twickenham. Or go and play Lansdowne Club before. It would just be class and give these players another opportunity. It would be another opportunity for coaches to step up and be in an international program. Yeah.
Look, you look at even like the Club 15 back in the day. That gave guys like the Gordy Reeds of this world a platform, dip their toe into first, sort of representative rugby. And yeah, you're right. It feels like there's an opportunity maybe missed somewhere. But look, David Nusafora has championed this emerging idea. He's done it with Emerging Ireland, and they took squads to South Africa and they played like the Cheetahs and the Currie Cup teams. I don't think, I've said this before, I don't think we're at that stage yet with Scotland. I don't think we've got the numbers that the pro teams could allow players to go during the season. But I think if these emerging Scotland games crop up, or they're Scotland A essentially, whatever they are, then we sort of have to say, look, let's get behind them, because there aren't that many opportunities to see these players playing a high level of rugby. Some of these guys, Freddie Douglas is playing A-team friendlies essentially. So if he gets a chance to go and play for Scotland against a potentially strong tier 2, tier 2.5 international team, then let's get behind it. And I think that's why it's important that the media as a whole get an opportunity to cover it, particularly if there's no fans, because it would be nice to know how it's actually gone on, how it's unfolded. So
I think emerging Scotland should go on a European tour. They should play Holland and Germany, and they should go and
remember the Churchill Cup.
Yes,
like
England Saxons against Canada A and America and Scotland A. Yeah,
but and I know we're in a world of far too many games and daft competitions and stuff, but
I didn't have an issue if it's a purely an A, rather than going on an international tour and it's not an international tour.
Totally.
Go and do those things. Have a European competition. Go and play Georgia, Romania. Yeah. Anyway, big fella. What we thought was going to be just talking about the Scotland squad selection against America, and it wouldn't take long. We're now way over an hour, and if anybody's been there for the beginning, please comment. Give us a like if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. All of that helps. Trust me, it helps spread the word, and it means that we can keep this content coming, not just on here, but through Scotland Rugby News. Big fella, great to see you. Enjoy your weekend. Let's see if we can send Trump's boys home with their tails between their legs. Final word from our sponsor. The Scotland Rugby News podcast has been brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV right now. There are thousands of jobs across Scotland, and you can find the one for you at S1 Jobs. So go on, start your search today. Have a great weekend. See you next week, big chap.